this is for the win, we are calling it. This is a PRCAI initiative to really spark the next leap in creative excellence to help our industry really show up better, I would say, at Cannes. The PR community here is really eager to learn from your global vantage point, especially your experience inside the jury room. Obviously, we are thrilled to have you help us demystify what it takes to craft really a case narrative that truly lands and crack the code to world-class communications. Participants, we have Suresh, who is the Chief Growth Officer at MNC Saatchi Group North America. Has a wealth of experience across McCann, Weiss, Ogilvy, Zeno, 27 years of that across Marcom's industry, whether it be in creative, digital, PR, and experiential. And he is served as a jury member of the Cannes Lions, Glass Lions, which is the Lions for Change, actually, and is a member of the Cannes Lions ANA CMO Growth Council. So are very actively involved in what is discussed in the jury rooms on how awards are being constructed. So huge learning from him across. He's also been on other juries across PR Week Awards, Sabers, etc. So today's our conversation, Suresh, will center around what makes Cannes Lions uniquely competitive, or what it takes to win at Cannes. Whether it's insight to story, how do you build a core narrative, how do you win the jury's trust, and what is the evidence and impact that we need to work towards. So give you 25 minutes on your narrative, opening remarks for the group.
Great. Thank you so much, Archana, and thank you everybody for the opportunity to meet. All those accolades you read out suddenly make me feel very old, like I should retire. But it's such a pleasure to meet all of you, and thank you again for the platform to converse. Dipti, Archana, and I had a lovely chat just a couple of days ago. What I wanted to, and again, I wanted to be very transparent. My relevant experience in this, I've been going to Cannes, wow, for about this year will be my 15th year, I think. And in all that time, very much as a participant of Cannes, i.e., submitting on behalf of the agency, etc. And then in 2023, I had the immense pleasure of actually being invited to be on the Glass Lions jury, which is, as Archana said, the Lion of Change, which is all centered around representation, fair representation of all spectrums of diversity, sort of age, race, gender, sexuality, and ability. At the same time, for the last 4+ years, I was invited in to be on the ANA Cannes Lions CMO Growth Council, which involves probably some of the world's most prominent CMOs of some of the world's largest brands, shaping the future of Cannes Lions, but also shaping the future of what creativity means. So I bring that added perspective, and what I share with you today is much more around. Nobody gave me a script. Nobody said, okay, this is how it takes to go and win a Cannes Lion. It's literally from the experience, from sitting inside the jury room, from being a participant, from also being involved in the conversations that shape the future of industry. So as I mentioned to Archana and Dipti about a couple of days ago, my experience, there are sort of 6 levers for you to really understand and master. And I'll briefly structure that conversation. There is authenticity, mindset, creativity rooted with insight, category shifts, impact, and process. So I'll be covering those as sort of broad sort of discussion areas. So starting with the first one on authenticity, I think the most important thing to remember is how is the work originated? What is the motivation behind the actual storytelling, and who's the team behind that work? And this is where it's so important to bring in that lived experience because that really matters in how the work actually shows up. So the most important thing is, how is this work originated? Like, what was the starting point that really motivated the brief that the client probably provides, or in some cases, both agency and client are trying to find a way to go to market, engage with a new community, a new culture. How do they actually come up with a brief that really lands creative strategically, right? So for me, it is super, super crucial that we understand the authenticity of how that story is told. And then that obviously becomes the motivation behind the storytelling, because ultimately, this is probably the oldest craft in the world, creativity. If you even go back to the times of the Neanderthals, when there was no television, there was no internet, etc., everybody sat around a campfire or a fire and told stories. That's what we do as human beings. We want to be entertained. We go through our social channels. We go to the cinemas. Still today, we are flicking through all our streaming platforms simply to be entertained. You read the news to also be entertained. Sometimes not very entertaining news when it's bad news, but it is a form of consumption. So everything, like when you think about how the work is originated, you need to think about that motivation behind how you tell that story. And most importantly, and this was particularly important in the Glass Lions jury, was how did it bring in lived experience? So I'm going to use an example. When I was in Ogilvy many, many, many years ago, one of the things, I ended up sort of walking past a room of three creators who was developing work with Pampers. You may be familiar with the brand, which is the children's diapers brand. I think it's part of Kimberly-Clark. I think Kimberly-Clark or P&G, yeah. And they were coming up with this idea for Pampers and engaging mothers, particularly as mothers were mostly are the highest consumption or are the highest purchasing audience. And I stopped by the room and I said, it's really strange that you guys are doing, and it was three male creatives. And I went, it's really strange that you don't have a woman's point of view, particularly a mother's point of view in this room. You are the creative developing a product targeted at mothers, and you have no mothering experience. Like, and that for me, that's what I mean by actually bringing in lived experience, legitimacy in creating the voice and the tonality that results in that work. And ultimately, if you have this right at the outset of it, the work shows itself later on down the line. And there's something I wanted to also touch on in terms of bringing the lived experience. And this is an important point. So as I mentioned, 4 years ago, I was invited to join the ANA Canline CMO Growth Council. And one of the things that we implemented as a group, a change that we implemented within Canlines, every submission today requires you to complete information about the team behind the work, simply because of the legitimacy of actually showing that you did bring that diverse point of view. You did have a diverse team working on, and I don't mean diversity, equity, inclusion. You have to tick the box, etc. But who had that lived experience that really elevated that work? Because that's what authenticity means. You don't have individuals who are so far removed and then simply splashing a campaign out in the world. But if it comes from a place where people genuinely know what it means to feel and experience it, then that work suddenly is automatically elevated, right? It's just from the proof point of the quality of the work. So that's point number one, authenticity. And please, at any point, do jump in with a question. I'd love to keep the conversation fluid. Second point is mindset. And again, as I mentioned to Archana and Dipti a few days ago, it really starts the outset of even thinking about the work, right? So what you don't want to do is get to a point where you've done all the strategy, you've done all the creative, it's landed in market, and then you start to think, oh, well, that was a great piece of work. Maybe we should think about entering an award. That's a little too late because you've not baked in the thinking right up front. So award-worthy work actually starts at the outset of the campaign development itself, not as an afterthought. That is super, super critical. And it's super critical that you have the joint buy-in of your agency or your representation, whichever part of the business you're in, and the brand side, the client side. You both need to be in this journey together because there are going to be ups and downs in that process. It's how you build that narrative from the outset. So award-worthy work really starts from the outset of the campaign development and not as an afterthought. And ultimately, how you design that piece of work that will create both impact and be recognized by the industry. You need to understand what your motivation behind it is. So identifying it's super critical. It's not just the Cannes line, but if you think of every other major award category, things like the Effies, Sabres, etc., everybody often asks for impact. And I'm very cognizant that I spent 16 years in PR before I moved to the integrated role. I'm very cognizant that in PR there was a lot centered around earned impressions and sort of readership, etc. There is my encouragement to you, and whilst I don't have an immediate answer, my encouragement to you is to think about elevating that KPI. What is the greater impact? What is the engagement from a particular audience that you're targeting, etc.? Showing that concrete proof actually elevates the work. And I, like, having seen multiple entries, hundreds of entries, in fact, one of the key things we kept going to as a jury member was, where is the impact and how does it relate back to the strategy and the creative that delivered, and how did it shift the market? That's super critical. And you don't, when I say shift the market, it doesn't mean that you ended up becoming the number one brand in the world and everybody's buying it, etc. It's much more around, if your focus was to shift the opinion of three very important politicians, and those three politicians at the end of the campaign shifted a policy or whatever it is, you've hit your goal, right? And it's about telling that story. So what I want to be super crystal clear, it's not about the quantification of your impact, it's about the qualification of your impact. Super critical. And there were a couple of examples. I cannot remember the names of the campaigns offhand, but there was a campaign from Costa Rica and Brazil. I remember this when we were shortlisting the work on the glass lines. And it was specifically about using WhatsApp to engage politicians so that they would change a policy about women's hygiene products. And that WhatsApp campaign delivered because the policy changed at the parliamentary level, right? So there was one goal, to change the policy at the parliamentary level, and it did so, which meant accessibility for young women who were starting their, and forgive me for being very direct, but starting their periods. So they were on this journey, they couldn't afford women's hygiene products, and the policy changed it to make it all sort of free for all these audiences. So for me, that one goal was met. Huge impact, and particularly at a parliamentary level. So think about the mindset as you start the campaign. What is the impact and motivation you want to see at the end of that work? So that's my point number two, mindset. The third, probably the most interesting and relevant and important point, is you need to have creativity that's rooted in insights. If you have no data points, particularly in a world that is all about data, right? We're driven by AI today. We're driven by accuracy and performance marketing, etc. Understanding your insights and data points are crucial, because that's going to be the kernel of an idea, or the seed that builds out an entire piece of work. Which is why a lot of, whether it's in PR or whether it's in advertising or performance marketing, it always starts with a data point. So in Cannes, as you know, creativity is always the focus in Cannes, and so you need to ensure that the work actually cuts through creatively. But creativity without the insights simply become ineffective. And for me, like as a member of the jury and also on the CMO Growth Council, we always come back to, how did that insight power your thinking? Right, and it's super critical to understand that nuance, and importantly, in that data point, where are all the other important elements? Things like culture. How did technology and AI, for example, play a role to get you to that data point that really help you elevate your storytelling? So here, I'd like to. And Megan, just if you can cue up the Vaseline case study. One thing I want to share here is a piece of work that ended up winning the Grand Prix on the glass line. So it's the Vaseline Transition Body Lotion, which I was very sort of honored to award that Grand Prix to that team. It was with Ogilvy and Vaseline in Singapore. And ultimately, what really elevated this piece of work was, and Cindy Gallup, I don't know whether any of you know her, but she's a formidable sort of Cannes Lion advocate and ambassador. She was the president of our jury. And the one thing that she she basically taught all of us on the jury, was that approach all the work, particularly on the glass lines, with cynicism, which means every piece of work and every campaign had to almost prove their point on why they needed to be on that glass line, which means we treated everything that we saw as a lie. Then they had to disprove it to prove that it was the truth. And what was super interesting about this piece of work is, as you will see in the case study in a second, they didn't just launch a product into market. They actually did their research for 2 years, R&D for 2 years. Importantly, and I say, if you remember, I talked about authenticity from the outset. They developed the work with the transgender community from the outset. So they didn't, 5 straight doctors didn't go and just do this in the corner of a lab and goes, hey, listen, we got a product. They literally went, we cannot do this without this community. Here's the interesting point. Vaseline's second largest market in the world is Thailand. Thailand also happens to have the biggest transgender community in the world. So they found a target audience to help them grow market share, which is still about their brand values and their brand truth. They're not veering away from skincare. They stuck to what they do best, but they found a market that connected authentically. In R&D with the transgender community for 2 years, until approximately 2 years, to the point when they found a product that actually met the needs of that transgender community. And then they partnered with a retail chain. I think it's called Watson. Forgive me, I can't remember the name of the retail chain. We'll see it in a second in the case study. But it wasn't just about partnering with a retail chain to have shelf space that is well underneath or right at the top so nobody could actually see it. It had prime time retail shelf space. And obviously they were testing the market to make sure it did, but what they ended up doing was signing a multi-year deal, which means you're in it for the long term. That's the key impact I was talking about. You're not here as a flash in the pan, I want to win an award, but I'm here to make a difference. And I'm here to make a difference that's actually going to transform our economy, our business, and also the community. So it spoke to an incredible, powerful piece of work that was launched on the day, I believe, that they announced marriage equality in Thailand. So when you think about all your media angles, you've got a tremendous story there. So without further ado, Megan, if you wanted to play the case study.
It's not every day that the agency responds a communication briefing with a product idea. But when that product idea fits perfectly to your brand purpose, you just gotta do it.
จริงๆเราอยากเป็นผู้หญิงตั้งแต่เด็กๆแล้วพอเราเริ่มรู้ตัวเนี่ยเราก็
ประมาณ14-15ตอนนั้นก็สาเหตุที่เริ่มเทคฮอร์โมนเพราะว่ามีรุ่นพี่พอเริ่มกินฮอร์โมนผิวฮอนก็ความละเอียดอะไรอย่างเงี้ยเวลาเราลูบตัวมันก็จะต่างกับ
แล้วก็พอมาเปลี่ยนเป็นผู้หญิงเนี่ยผิวเขาก็จะแห้งมากขึ้นแล้วก็ในระหว่างที่มันไม่มีอะไรสมดุลเลยเนี่ย
After 2 years of research, we actually were able to come up with the specific ingredients to help address the skin problems that the female transgender consumer are experiencing. The isoflavone is considered the natural estrogen, so it helps healthy transitioning process. That's pretty much the hero ingredients that makes this particular product actually unique.
In creating this product, we never thought of it as a limited edition. We decided that it was going to serve a community and it would stay on shelf forever.
ของหนูส่วนหนูเห็นตรงเพราะว่าเขาติดเทรนด์ Twitter ด้วยค่ะ
Derma Transition Body Lotion
มันไม่ใช่การที่แบบเอาสีรุ้งมาคุณพี่มันไม่ใช่แคมเปญที่แบบเอาสีรุ้งมาครอบแล้วก็บอกว่าอันนี้คือของ LGBT อะไรอย่างเงี้ย
นี่แหละบางทีมันไม่ได้มาในรูปแบบแค่การเมืองแต่มันมาในรูปแบบของบิวตี้แล้ว
Thank you, Megan.
Wonderful. Yes. Vaseline was back at Cannes this year as well, with Vaseline verified. in
Indeed.
25 with another great program that they did. Yes, this is. You mentioned
Indeed.
something when we were talking 2 days ago about the fact that how they presented it, because, and
Yeah.
would you like to talk about
Yes, I was
at
about to.
Glass Lions, how they actually allow people that's the only category in which people have to give a live presentation, right?
Correct. Well,
So you
one of
could
three.
shed
So
some light. Yes, thank you.
absolutely. So it's only one of. I just wanted to make a quick correction. I, for some reason, recalled it as being marriage equality, but it's actually Transgender Day of Visibility. That was the day they launched. So that was the PR hook on it. So to what Archana just said, there's only three. I think Canada's got something like 32 categories of entries. You can sort of enter all sorts of categories, but there are only three that involve live presentations in Cannes, meaning we whittle down, we review as a jury for about 3 months prior, 3 to 4 months prior to actually arriving in Cannes. And ultimately, I think the top 20 or so pieces of work end up arriving in Cannes. And those top 20 approximately would involve the teams presenting to the jury in a live audience, which means anybody who's attending can walk into the audience and watch it, but the jury members will be sort of right up front, listening to and analyzing, because ultimately it stress tests the work, and because we get to question it. So they present for about 15-20 minutes, then we have a number of minutes to actually stress test the work, and then we go into deliberation. So what was particularly powerful about that presentation, you saw the ambassador. I cannot remember how to pronounce her first name, but her last name was Newt, and we knew her as Newt, N-U-T-T. Newt was there on stage presenting, and I want to be very absolutely, because it was so powerful. Newt's command of English wasn't tremendous, but her story was so authentic. She was part of the development. She came up as a proof point to the success of that work because it impacted her community. And then alongside her was the global CMO of Vaseline, who was a white American woman. What I particularly loved about her story was, and I want to be very clear, the Vaseline Transgender Body Lotion really was only designed for male to female transitioning, because male to female is when the skin is affected. If it's the other way around, you don't get impacted by skin dryness. So it was very, very focused on a specific community. But what was really powerful about Kathleen Dunlop, her name is Kathleen Dunlop, she's become a very good friend since then, is the fact that she herself has a transgender child, right? And it's a female to male transgender child. But whilst that her child wasn't impacted by the product specifically, but she brought that lived experience of being a parent to a transgender child. So we go back to the original point about the lived experience, rooted in brand purpose. There was a clear market need for it. There was a growth opportunity. It was all the ingredients of a very powerful story in the room. And that for us was a key ingredient and actually an award-winning piece of work. And I also want to be very clear, in the jury room, we don't necessarily need to award a Grand Prix. We don't even necessarily need to award a gold. In fact, it is about the quality of the work. So achieving these milestones really, when you win a gold or silver or bronze for that matter, is a massive, massive sort of effort, because it takes a lot for the jury to decide to award anything. A Grand Prix pushes that work over the top. So, that just shows the impact of the work. Before I continue on to the next sort of 3 points, are there any other questions so far? Okay, great. I'll continue. So I talked about authenticity, mindset, and creativity rooted in insights. The fourth point is about
Could I interject?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry, rather late, but since you brought up mindset again, do you think advertising agencies have a better mindset than PR agencies, or to win? Because you've been on both sides. And from my limited experience, I can say that they definitely start thinking the moment the awards get over, and they're already thinking like last year in June, they're already dissecting the awards and looking at what categories won, what is it that we should be working towards. And by now they already have 2 or 3 ideas that they are shooting for.
Yeah.
Now,
So
at a PR agency, I haven't seen that. rigor.
So you are very right in terms of the mindset. So in fact, we have on the creative agency side. Actually, I'm not going to use the word creative because I think every discipline can be creative. The advertising side, they convene what's called the Global Creative Council, so however they label it, a Creative Leadership Council, whatever. They convene frequently to assess work that will be ready for Cannes, because ultimately advertising agencies traditionally have always, Cannes is the Oscars of the advertising industry. So for them, that's the benchmark, that's the gold standard. Whilst they have the rigor and the mindset of actually just focusing on winning the awards, I tell you the difference, and I think maybe this is the benefit of actually coming up from PR, because I think we're such an underrated sort of skill set, because I used to hate this when particularly as a PR person, when advertising agencies come and give us the finished product and go and PR this. I used to get so angry, because, and so me coming and sitting an integrate role, coming from PR, my number one job, in fact, 3 big wins we had last year. One was a big Super Bowl win, one was a FIFA World Cup win, and another sort of FMCG product. It's super important because clients says, "Oh, we want this campaign to be talked about, etc." And then what a lot of traditional agencies do is they drum up the creative, etc., and then they hand over the baton to the PR agency to go and PR this. However, the difference is if you don't bake in earned thinking from the start, you have no PR platform at the end of it because you're trying to scramble to make something happen. So for me, my instinct as a person that's come from the integrated background, from the outset of campaign development, I bring in my earned experts, so that they think about how the idea has earned legs and ability to actually create buzz from the outset. The earned approach is very different. So this is the second point to your question, Archana. Yes, the creative agencies or advertising agencies have the mindset to really, from the start, they know they want to win a Cannes Lion Award because it's their CV. It goes on their CV. I've been a Cannes Award winning sort of creative, etc. However, the better storytellers are actually PR people, because that's what we do. We tell stories. It's in the craft of actually delivering earned media. So for me, I have always experienced, because our job is to trying to convince people who will not pay to put coverage in some form of media, right? And that's the craft of storytelling. The story has to be so engaging and so compelling that people want to write and listen and talk about it. That's the craft of earned media. So for me, I think PR professionals are better storytellers, but fail to actually elevate themselves as a result because they don't have the right mindset. Whereas advertising folk are all about the glamour and the sheen and the shine of the awards, because it's all about the actual physical output of watching a tangible ad, but they don't necessarily they aren't necessarily the natural storytellers. So I think actually PR professionals actually have a better shot of developing a better storyline, but they need to be able to have the mindset, let's make this award worthy from the outset.
And
Does that
maybe
answer your
some
question?
spit and polish.
Correct. Absolutely. At the end. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Great. So point number 4, I talked about authenticity, mindset, creativity rooted with insights. Point number 4 is about being cognizant of category shifts. The advertising and the creative industry, or Cannes Lions, has been, now I think 80 years? Something like 80 years or so. And obviously the 80 years, the industry has transformed, not just transformed, but the way consumers are engaging and consuming has transformed. I think in the last 2 or 3 years, creators and influencers has become a category in Cannes. And actually, I was very proud to be a part of a team at Vice Media, and our client was Logitech, and we were the brand and the agency that actually petitioned to include creators as a category. So we had an entire stage moment with the global CMO of Logitech, and we launched the first creator category for Cannes. So being guided by what you're seeing right now, particularly when it comes to data points, AI, creator, influencer, or whatever else is shaping the communications industry today, find a way to make sure that you are starting to think about how all of that's playing a role in the work that you do, because it keeps you relevant. It crucially keeps you, your brand, your skill set, your industry relevant in the constant evolution of the marketing communications industry. And that elevates the work, right? That elevates the work to make sure that it is super culturally relevant. And culture, when I say culture, it doesn't mean people who are just on skateboards and I have a community, etc. It's literally about how the work actually is engaging, how to the community you're trying to reach, how accurate is it to reach that specific community, what technological platforms, social content platforms are you using to actually elevate that work, and that makes that work culturally relevant. So just think about the work and how those category shifts are actually impacting the work that you do, and demonstrate that, because that also shows you to be a very forward-thinking, future-facing, and future-ready organization. So that's a quick point, and point number 4 on category shifts. Impact. And impact is point number 5. And this is where we talk about identifying that kernel of an idea, the data point on the outset. This is where it comes back, right? It's full circle. You need to demonstrate the impact of the work. How do you measure the concrete impact of the work, and how that work is actually demonstrated real world impact? It has to be backed by data. Crucially, whether it's social data or cultural data, economic metrics, you need to be able to demonstrate real strong proof points. And I said, one of the things we talked about earlier was this campaign in Costa Rica about women's, young women's hygiene, feminine hygiene products. And the number one goal was using, and they had basically used the campaign on WhatsApp, develop a campaign on WhatsApp to shift the parliamentary policy on making young women's feminine hygiene products accessible to all for free. And they did. It achieved its goal. And for us as a jury, that was incredibly powerful. It delivered impact. It really cut through, and it actually drove permanent change. It was crucial. I want to talk about another example. Megan, maybe you can cue up the orange case study here. And this is super interesting. And this is a case of what not to do, right, when it comes to impact. And I'm going to talk about this as well. So you will see this case study in a second. And if you have, then you will remember this. But if you haven't, this was an incredibly powerful case study. Don't get me wrong, incredibly powerful. And when all of us as a jury for the 3-4 months prior to arriving in Cannes viewed this, all of us went, this is going to win the Grand Prix. This is number one. This is going to win the Grand Prix. It was incredibly impactful, brilliant creative approach, etc. And then it came to the presentation in the room. And what was super interesting is we had the CEO. I can't remember the agency. I think it was Publicis. Maybe it was Leo Burnett. I can't remember. Leo's part of Publicis, so I think it is Leo Burnett. And then we had the CMO of Orange, which is the French telecom company. So for context, Orange has been sponsoring and partnering with women's national football in France for over 20 years. And the entire case study was about elevating the quality of women's football and how men only followed the Blues, as they call it, the men's national team, the Blues. And what they wanted to do was elevate the impact of female football, because it was a incredible sport there, but it only had a very niche following. So they wanted to create equality on that, hence why it was in the Glass Lions jury. But they created this brilliant campaign where you will see it in a second. Cinematically, it was a very, very clever campaign. And when it came to the results, they talked about, oh my God, so many people started to tune in and watch women's football. We showed impact, blah, blah, blah. And then one of the jury members asked the most powerful question that completely derailed the campaign. So bear in mind, we thought we were going to award this piece of work the Grand Prix from the outset, right up to being in the jury room. And then we had asked the question, so since you've been sponsoring and partnering with women's football for the last 20 years, one of the biggest challenges in female football and women's football is pay parity, pay equality. Male footballers get paid millions of dollars, endorsements, etc. In 20 years, where do the women feature? Have you achieved? Bearing in mind, they sponsor, they pay the women's footballers, right? And they went, yeah, we haven't quite done that yet, and we still have quite a way to go. That completely destroyed the authenticity and the legitimacy of the campaign. Because for us, in 20 years, as a brand who's championing equality, particularly in that category, Glass Lines category, it's about equality. you still haven't awarded fair equality pay for fair equal pay for women's footballers. And that basically, if you think about a campaign that's built on really solid legs, all the legs on that campaign win. However, we did acknowledge that the fact this is genius work creatively and entertainment-wise. So we made a recommendation as a jury that this should actually go into the entertainment category. Jury members are allowed to do that. If we see a piece of work that actually it's really weak in this category, but actually we acknowledge the brilliant creativity that went into it and the cinematography, and it should go into the entertainment category. It actually won in the entertainment category. I want to show you this example of not showing the genuine impact that really needed to cut through, resulted in something that could have won the Grand Prix into not winning anything at all. So let's play that. I don't hear volume. There's no sound for me.
No sound at all. Yeah.
If there's a problem with the case, I don't know what happy for you all to do is share it. Okay.
I'll just share it.
The French women's national team is drawing attention with a new ad.
Publicité, je sais pas si vous l'avez vu, elle est incroyable.
Tem comercial que tá bombando, né?
É sensacional.
Best marketing I have ever seen.
It is the most amazing thing I have ever seen.
It's the best ad I've seen anywhere.
The exact kind of thing that would go viral.
Stop what you're doing and watch this right now.
Ouais, c'est passé.
Bravo.
Oui, c'est passé.
Oh oui.
Les Bleus qui reviennent dans le match.
Et on a encore le droit de rêver. Ah, qu'est-ce que c'est ça ici?
Avec le pied droit. Ah, il va être direct.
Ça va.
Le centre en frais. C'est ça, le football qu'on aime.
Oh my God, it's so good.
2-minute video, the footage rewinds.
The VFX are removed. It is in fact the elite French women's teams.
Pegou futebol feminino.
Ils en réalité, ce sont les femmes de l'équipe de France.
Brilliant.
Wait, what?
All right, mate, show me what I'm looking at.
That tells me that women can't play like men, they can even play better.
That was wonderful, Suresh. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. So
Indeed,
creative.
what a powerful...
And looking at category shifts. So it was looking at AI, FX, all of that being integrated with content creators and everything coming around. But they clearly weren't solving the real problem, right? So it wasn't 100%. A real solution to a real problem.
100%, which brings me to the final point. So again, just recapping, I talked about authenticity, mindset, creativity, rooted insights, category shifts, impact. And the final point is process. Know the criteria and the instructions. Read them really, really carefully. So in this instance, with the orange ad, the criteria is about reaching and achieving gender and representation equality. Yes, you elevated women in that program, but did you achieve equality when we genuinely tested against, did you achieve pay parity? Like they talked about the impact of the impressions you saw, etc., how they were going to create this as an educational tool in school, but you didn't live your own authentic brand story. You didn't give them pay parity for 20 years. So for me, for us in the jury room, it was like, you've literally disqualified that piece of work because you have failed to live up to the point of equality. So the final point is about process. Read the instructions inside out, understand the criteria, and stress test the work against that criteria each time. And so really, really understand that space. And then also, and I'll tell you this, a little secret from inside the jury room. I think when we first started the process as jury members, we had something like 300 plus entries to review. And entries, right? So everybody's entries, we had to review 300 plus, and that is already whittled down from the actual. So there's a filtering process that CAN itself does to whittle down. So it was probably double that amount or triple that amount previously, whittled down to 300 something for the jury members, the selected jury members, to review. And then we had about 3 or 4 virtual touch bases before we actually met in person in CAN, and it kept whittling down. So jury members are all also have full-time jobs. So the easiest way to really get under the skin of the jury members and really engage is a really powerful video. You guys are storytellers. That's what PR people do. I know that's what I was trained in. Tell a story. And tell that story beautifully through a video. So think about the narrative you land, how you tell that story, and make sure that that work is elevated. Obviously, you have to complete all the written piece as well, but make sure the quality of your video reel, and this is like the process bit. So again, we start with that we talked about at the outset, having the mindset of worthy work, etc. Understand that you're going to have to, if there are things that you need to capture behind the scenes, etc., that mindset starts from the outset, because all that input ends up becoming part of your reel at the end. Make sure you're capturing all that insight along the way. Or hang on, this could be a really interesting behind the scenes component of a reel that we might put at the end. So that winning mindset starts from the outset. At the end of it, when you look at the process, actually you have all the ingredients to tell your story. So think about your reel from the outset so that you actually have an amazing story to put together at the end. I'm cognizant of time. We've got 15 minutes left. I did want to just share one lovely hero story for you as well. And actually, it is from India. This is a piece of work we were all so incredibly moved by. And I think you will all be very familiar with it, which is the Lay's Project Farm Equal. It was a beautiful story. And on the day, it was, this for me had the makings of all the components we just talked about: authenticity, mindset, the creativity, particularly creativity rooted with insights. It had category shift as well. It showed about product development in that process. There was a real genuine impact, and they thought on how they packaged this story very authentically. And then I'll tell you a little bit of an insight on what resulted in the work being awarded what it did. Girish, I see your hand up.
I can go after the video.
Okay, let's do the video.
Lay's contracts with 37,600 acres of farms to grow potatoes. Recently, some of our farms were seeing a significant drop in yield. We analyzed these farms and observed a unique shift. Due to urban migration, farms that were led by men are now being led by women. To add to her struggle, traditionally, most of the labor-intensive agricultural work was done by men. Tools and practices were also designed ergonomically around them.
मेन्यू करनी पड़ते और फिर पीठ पर लटकाना पड़ता है करना चाहेगा 4-5 औरत कर सकते हैं उस काम को.
To fuel their resilience, Lay's and US Aid created Farm Equal, a project to redesign an age-old industry with gender ergonomics.
Gender ergonomics is a design process that considers the physical differences between genders. The average Indian female body is very different from the male body, with women not only being 20% shorter, but also weighing 30% lighter than men. This affects her capacity to push, pull, carry, or grip handles, making it harder for her to use standard tools.
As our first initiative, we redesigned heavy farm machinery with Neo. We switched to a lighter material and redistributed the weight, putting it with wheels.
अब जाते जी के हाथ में ही लेके चले जा.
The handles are also adjustable for the varied heights of women across India.
चार आगे के तो कोई लगा लो तो बहुत एरिया घेर के चलेंगे तो दवा जल्दी लगेगी.
We are also using the study to re-engineer standard hand tools that haven't been changed for centuries.
Also, for the first time ever, we pushed to make women farmers a part of the Indian agro-history with a commemorative stamp.
Seeing its success, we're calling for collective action from every industry to fight this bias by making all our learnings public.
Thank you. Girish.
Thanks. So Suresh, I'm sort of, going back to your new business director days when you were in PR. Imagine that as a first timer, as many of us on this call will be, when we actually go to the site to upload an entry, do you have any tips for us in terms of how intimidating or not that process is? And any tips on how to actually get the process of submission right?
I don't understand the question because it's quite a direct portal, like information gathering portal. So for me, I would try to find, honestly, I would quickly Google and try to find examples of how to upload submissions effectively, etc. But for me, I would go into the portal, understand the questions, because you're given a few weeks to, or a length of period to actually upload this. I would, and this is where it goes into my next section, which is about the idea generation methods. Read the questions, the criteria, go away and draft those answers multiple times. Stress test it with your teams. Like I put down here 2 things that I think is super important if you want to be an award-winning agency. First of all, ultimately the number one goal is build an infrastructure that actually focuses on the awards process itself, which means get your best copywriters. It may not be the people that worked on the work. Get your best copywriters who are great storytellers, right? Work on that creative reel, the storytelling, etc. So the way we have done it before is we would understand the criteria, go and read the process of what to upload. Things may change throughout the years. So I can't remember, I think it was about 2-3 years ago, the last time we submitted, but there are specific questions to answer, etc. within that. Download that format, go away and get your copywriters to write all of that up a few times. For me, I would create an awards war room, is what we call it. Literally think about the categories you're going to go after, how you're going to build that, and literally print out and plaster, this is the category, this is the criteria, and then think about the work that you have that fits in all of this. And then stress test, go against pin up the work and goes, does this answer this brief? Does it really land what it's trying to say along this? So that war room really is, think about it as a pitch war room, turn it into an awards war room. Pin up the work, measure it against the category, and make sure that it actually creates the focus and lands that story. And then importantly, and I like doing this because I sit with my chief strategy officer and my chief creative officer in particular, we do role playing. So I think about myself as the jury member in the room, and they present that work to me, right? Tell me the story. How are you going to narrate the story? And tell me, so that if I'm not in the room, am I convinced with what you're trying to tell me? And that role playing, and think about it, you rehearse your pitches, right? But you've role play on an award submission. You think I'm going to poke holes on it. My job as the person in the room, as a jury member in that agency or in that brand, is to poke holes in it so that ultimately when your work is submitted and your work ends up in the jury room, there are no holes to poke. It's then based on the authenticity and the impact of that work. So for me, 2 things is create that awards war room, be serious about it, measure the work against the criteria, and then ultimately role play it from a jury and a presenter mode. Even if it's not a jury that's going to involve a live presentation, that role playing allows you to really benchmark the work and storytell that work. Hope that helps. And that's I know I overran, but that is my little bit of a brain dump.
This is lovely. No, lovely. Thank you, Suresh. In fact, just a comment on that last point to you, Girish. I think what we don't spend enough time doing is to look at the various categories where a particular award work can be submitted. And there are many times when, like he found, that work didn't stand in Glass Lion, it was an entertaining work, it should have gone there. So sometimes there would be campaigns that lose out. But let's get questions from the floor. If not, I had one. Anybody who'd like to ask Suresh a question? There we are, Sujeta.
Hi, Suresh. Thank you so much.
Hi.
Right. So I have very one specific question. Are there any categories where great Indian works consistently, underperforms? And what exact few points are there that you would like to tell us what exactly is missing?
Wow, that's a difficult question because I don't have all the categories at the top of my head. I will have to say, however, 15 years of being in Cannes, the work broadly from, and forgive me for generalizing here, but the work from Southeast Asia, and that's from India, from Thailand, from Indonesia, from the Philippines, and the transitioning body lotion that was from Singapore, even though it was in sort of a Thai community. They are incredibly powerful emotional storytellers, like compared to the work from everywhere else. I think where a lot of and again, forgive me for not being able to pinpoint India specifically as a market, but Southeast Asia generally, one of the things that we don't see cut through on in particular is when it comes to much more of the forward-facing, technologically more adventurous pieces of work like entertainment. So you saw the Orange piece of work where they use a lot of brilliant technology to actually tell a great story. Things like entertaining innovation is not something we're seeing a lot of cutting through. But where it comes to emotional storytelling and creativity, I think the markets in Southeast Asia have that covered. So I'd encourage to think about, and honestly, I know this for a fact because India is probably one of the most advanced technological sort of countries in the world. So I think there's a great opportunity to build on that. I remember it was something close to in fact, this was one of the awarded pieces of work. Harpic, I think it was Harpic Locator, Loocator, which is a work that came out of India. And it was about helping women find public toilets using an app that was developed by Harpic. That for us was like, okay, this is starting to show like they're using technology within the ecosystem of the country. So for us, and I think it ended up getting a bronze or a silver, I can't remember specifically, but we loved seeing that. And like the second most awarded or the second highest ranking piece of work was Pink Chip. I think it was awarded a gold, but didn't win the Grand Prix. It was a gold. It was about the economic impact, and I think it came out of the Netherlands, was showing using technology, the economic impact of what women could have on industry. So them becoming CEOs of companies and what that resulted in financial growth of an organization. And that was very technologically driven because it was all about the stock market and tracking and etc. So I think there's something to be said around innovation technology that we'd love to see more from Southeast Asia as a whole.
Sure. Thank you.
There's a question from Shibani.
Hi, Suresh.
Hi.
Thank you so much
Hi.
for that amazing session. Very, very insightful. So my question for you was, what part of the process most often gets skipped when impact is assumed instead of proven? What I mean is, like, in many projects we assume impact, because the idea feels like really strong or the execution looks, spectacular. So I want to just understand that what step in the process is like often missing, where impact should ideally be tested or challenged or validated. Do we wait till after it's done?
It's difficult for me to answer that because it really depends on the type of work that you're executing, right? So for me, that is why developing and creating a measurable goal from the outset. Like I talked about, you need to know from the outset as you're developing the work, what are you trying to impact? What change you're trying to impact? And that gives you a KPI to go back to. And I think I talked about or from authenticity, you needed to identify the data point that you wanted to shift. And then when it comes to the impact of the campaign, you're measuring how that does against that data point. So I think in any campaign, the most important thing is you need to have a KPI set from the outset, and then you go back to actually measuring that KPI at the end of that campaign period. It depends. Some campaign periods, depending on the product or service or what you're trying to impact, you're measuring that impact as you go along, right? So it's accumulated and amalgamated. But more often than not, I know this categorically, particularly the Glass Lion, any work that didn't demonstrate genuine impact just walked out the door. Like literally, we were, okay, just dismiss. And frankly, this is something you should also know. Every jury member is looking for a reason to shorten the shortlist, which means like they're finding for the easy outs. No impact, out. No creativity, out. Like, because otherwise we're like sitting down in a room and reviewing 300 plus pieces of work. They're looking for every reason to shorten that shortlist, which means if the things that elevate to the top are things that really have demonstrated proven impact. So for us, and particularly in that room, it wasn't just about, oh, look, that was really nice. There's men, there's women, there's people of color, there's people who are disabled in the picture, etc., or in the video. It is about what did you do to actually shift? And that's why the example of Orange was so powerful. When we asked the impactful question, did you achieve pay parity, which is one of the biggest issues in sport, right? Gender equality in sport. Did you achieve pay parity, considering you spent 20 years advocating for this and championing and talking about how wonderful you are as a brand? You failed. And that's crucial. So for me, impact is a constant in your campaign period. You need to be measuring. And that's why there's a lot of things about being able to use data points, real-time data points to shift campaigns, right? If you are seeing in real-time data point, this is not creating the impact needs, we need to shift a focus on this campaign. How do we shift that focus? And so for me, all of that, and actually, if that ends up happening, by the way, like you're developing a campaign, but you've got a real-time tracking system to show the impact and the validity, and you literally discover halfway through that campaign, we're not hitting our goals. How do we adjust this campaign in real time to really readjust the story? That is an amazing story to tell, by the way. Like, we're tracking this so closely that we have tools and technology that helps us decide whether we're actually hitting the mark. And if we don't, how do we course correct so that we can generally make that impact? I would tell that story because for me, like, holy shit, they are genuinely inspired by what they're trying to do. And they've showed us when it was failing, how they changed course in order to make it a success. That is a very honest, truthful story of real shift and change. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Deepti, do you have a question, or anybody else have a question? Aditya or
Sorry,
Suresh?
yeah, I had a question. So my question is regarding the category. You told us to watch out for new categories as well. So if you had to bet on one category that's upcoming and also will matter more in the next 3 years, which one would it be and why?
Well, very good question, Aditya. And again, I cannot future gaze because there will be categories coming out that I won't be familiar with. I would say right now, with the state of the world, think about the state of the world that we live in. I think sustainable development is going to be crucial. And I can say that to you as well, because a big focus of the Cannes Lion ANA CMO Growth Council is about sustainability. And sustainability covers inclusivity, diversity, economic sustainability, ecological sustainability, all of that. Sustainability is huge. Anything that's also going to be in the category of creators and influencers, because the power is shifting from brand and agency to actually storytelling, and authentic storytelling tends to come from people who are creators and influencers. So, like, what work are you doing in that space? Like, for me, these are the two that a lot of focus will go on in the next few years. And then you have all your other core categories. Of course, I wouldn't diminish any of them, but people who are going to be driving a lot of impactful change and work that really is going to get noticed will, I think, be in these two spaces. And I don't know whether you saw, but it's an Indian guy. What's his name? I cannot, forgive me. It's an Indian guy who decided to create his own sort of creator studio. I think his name is Damya, Dhamya, maybe American Indian guy. And he went on to open up his own, and he was like really scrambling and trying to build a business. And just, I think after about 4 or 5 years of doing that, he just signed a 24 or 40 episode deal with Fox News. That's the power of creators today, right? And Kabe, the African content creator who lives somewhere in Germany or Netherlands, I can't remember, just sold his company for $900 million. That's the power of the creator economy. It's not to be underestimated. So understand the things that are, and this is part of the whole thing we talked about, category shifts. Be very aware what category shifts are. Right, so things like what's happening in the economy, what's happening in the ecological climates of the world, etc., and how are brands responding to it.
There's also a category on data that has come up more recently.
Indeed.
And because that is more relevant, right? With AI available to sort of scrunch data, so look at those categories. Newer categories are always I would think less competitive. So that may be something that you can definitely go after.
And I would also encourage, just FYI, it was super interesting because just FYI as well, from inside the jury room, at the end of every jury session, when we come to decisions, we always have a meeting with the jury directorship and board of Cannes, and they ask us for our insights, etc. Of the 300 something plus entries, and if you're interested in the glass lines, so this is only a point of view specifically to the glass lines, because we had quite a few entries from India from glass lines, including one from my own agency at that point from McCann. If you are thinking about the glass lines, of the 300 plus entries that went in, only one had a story about men. The remaining 300 plus were all about women, right? And so I asked the question as a jury member in the room, is this category only for women or is this for men? And they said, no, it's about gender representation. And that one male entry was about Black men, how the injustice that Black men are facing in America, which is a genuinely true issue. And nobody capitalized on that story, right? So it's not just about women, it's about men. And what was super interesting is I was the only male in a body of 10 jury members. So there are 9 women on this jury. And 95% of the work was about menstruation. And I'm being very direct on this. And the jury members were like, we are so tired to think that women are one-dimensional. Yeah. We're not one-dimensional. We are about, we can run countries, we can run economies, we can run companies. And, so it was a very powerful moment because I didn't feel I had the right to speak in the room. And it was the women who said this in the room. Like, there's more to us than just menstrual pain. And for us, that was super powerful. And that's why I would encourage you to just go and look from 2024, the top works that were awarded. Pink Chip was an incredibly powerful, economic, impactful campaign focused on elevating women to CEOs. And Cindy Gallup, as our president, was like, that's exactly the type of work we want to see happen for women in the industry.
Okay. I think Meghna is telling us time's up.
No, I have a question rather.
Sure.
I have
a question. Lovely.
I think I can ask a question as well. Thank you, Suresh. It was a brilliant session. Loved each point about it. I have one question, and it's from a macro perspective. I'm sure you have judged a lot of entries from all over the world. What is that one edge that Indian entries have, and we as Indian PR agencies and consultancies should capitalize on? What's that one edge that we have over other countries?
Ooh, powerful question.
After you, I'll try and give a response to that too.
Okay. I'm actually curious, Archana, if you wanted to go first. I'm curious what you have to say, then I'll have a point of view.
Yeah, I think we're a land of so many problems. When there are so many issues, you can definitely find reasons, or brands can find reasons to find solutions to make an impact. And I think that is our biggest asset, and we're not doing enough about it. I think what we don't what we lack is not, maybe a campaign is there, but we're not packaging it. Like I said, the spit and polish to put it out and to be courageous enough to put it up on a can stage is something that we've did a long way.
It's funny you say that, because
Suresh.
I was going to actually say, you talk about it's a big country with a lot of diversity. I was going to say that's the one thing that often doesn't come across, the actual depth of diversity in the country. You have multiple languages, you have multiple cultures, etc. And a lot of people who are ignorant, particularly, and I say this blatantly as somebody who, I was born and brought up in Malaysia, I lived in London, and I live in New York now. People assume India is one country, right? And people who are ignorant about it, and it's terrible. But for me, like, the one big thing is the diversity and the richness of the country means complex problems, to your point, a lot of complex, diverse problems, and those problems need solutions. Being able to cater those conversations across the continent is incredibly a powerful story. So for me, I think maybe, and again, forgive me, this is a point of view of one, being able to demonstrate the complexity of that storytelling would be super powerful.
Thank you.
Lovely.
Thank you. But I do have a follow-up question. I'll be really quick. Isn't diversity really stereotypical for India? I mean, that's how India is always demonstrated. So how do we flip that coin?
So I wouldn't say diversity in terms of just race or culture, etc., but diversity of the economic challenges, diversity of the technological challenges, diversity of the things that actually the social challenges, right? And that for me is something that being very open, direct, and honest about that is crucial in the storytelling.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, Archana, I won't ask a question. I got all my answers in the briefing, but I'm glad so many people asked the question. So Suresh, this is a hit, spot on, session.
Thank you.
Thank you for beautifully presenting everything. And Archana, thank you for steering. And thank you for the briefing call, because that was intense. And this is a great outcome. So thank you.
Super.
Archana,
Suresh is brilliant. So, I mean,
thank you so much. You're too kind.
We were just nudging him along to start thinking, to talk to us and infusing him.
Thank you.
So, thank you so much. That was brilliant.
A pleasure.
I think
thank you.
Good takeaways in terms of lived experiences. I thought that's really lovely to elevate really the work. Definitely qualification of the objective. To say that is because they ask that as part of your entry. What is your objective?
Indeed.
And if you can marry your impact to really endorse that, then the battle's really won. And really looking at integrating culture as part of your creativity, well, sure, you'll definitely have a winner there. So thank you, Suresh, for those insightful examples, as well as your insights from inside the jury room.
My absolute pleasure, and hopefully get to see some of you in Cannes this year.
Absolutely, and thanks, Girish, for introducing us to Suresh. Let's remain connected.
Thanks, Suresh.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a lovely evening. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.